Hi, friends. This episode of Big Blue Banter is brought to you by Prize Picks. Head on over to Prize Picks and use promo code BANTER, and they'll match up to $100 on a new deposit. Thank you and enjoy.
Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter, New York Giants football podcast. I'm Dan Schneier. Joined as always my co-host Nick Filato. We're rolling through NFL draft profiles again today. We've done Marvin Harrison Jr. We've done Malik Neighbors. Let's get to the other of the big three. At least for me, big three. I feel like, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again. These three wide receivers to me are elite of elite blue chip prospects. And yes, in 7 of the last 10 draft classes, they would be my wide receiver one, including all the way down to the one who we're going to discuss today, Rome Odunze, who I think will probably go down for both of us as our wide receiver 3, not 2. I have debated back and forth on 2 and 3 with him, and I love Neighbors so much. It's so hard for me because I think about every time I come back to what Jeremiah said about in those third down and red zone situations, when you know the ball's going to your wide receiver 1, whether that be Neighbors, Harrison, or Odunze, who's going to make those catches when they're not open? And I do still think that would be Odunze potentially over a Neighbors type, maybe not over a Marvin Harrison type. So it's interesting for me, but Neighbors just too explosive and fun to put behind him. So I love all these guys, Nick, but let me first start by asking you on Odunze. Do you also have them as all three in their own tier at wide receiver? Do you also have some thoughts of Odunze being in that range of a Harrison and a Neighbors, or maybe do you have him a little behind?
I think they're all very close. I would have Harrison Jr. first, and I'd probably put him in a separate tier than the other two, and then the other two would be in the same tier. But I also have Neighbors. Like, it's not necessarily a debate in my mind between Neighbors and Odunze. Okay. I have Neighbors higher than Odunze, but it does not necessarily mean Neighbors is better than Odunze at everything. Obviously, we know Rome Odunze is one of the best contested catch, and we're going to get into this, wide receivers in college football, which can really come in handy for a New York Giants offense that sometimes gets stagnant and needs to rely on 1v1
throwing it up, right?
Enough, right? Yeah,
just a third down, force the ball somewhere, right? To one of these receivers, let him make a play. Now you got to have the quarterback who's willing to just throw the freaking ball into tight coverage, but hopefully at some point that quarterback, whoever it may be for the Giants, is willing to do that. So let me start, Nick, by maybe you getting into your synopsis of Rome Odunze after watching his film. We can start with a little synopsis action, and then we can get into some more, individual points.
Synopsis. All right, here we go. Rome Odunze has prototype X size and is a smooth mover that plays in a balance controlled manner. He has the concentration of a premier baseball hitter. He bats 400. His ability to track, locate, flash late hands, adjust his body, and secure catches at their highest point while shielding the catch point from defenders is elite. It's not surprising he caught 75% of his contested catches in 2023. There are a few wide receivers in college who possess his kind of body control and adjustment ability in tight, confined spaces. His route tree is diverse, and he displayed advanced processing up his route stem on the vertical plane, consistently working into defenders' blind spots to establish leverage and create consternation. He's also very fluid for his size and can bend, sink his hips, and lean up his stem with a smooth, gliding pace that allows him to create separation at the college level. Still, he's not exceptionally explosive out of his breaks for a wide receiver being discussed this high in the draft, nor does he possess a second gear, especially for someone being discussed this high in the draft, which leads to questions about his consistency with creating separation against top cornerbacks in the NFL. Even with the 4.45 40-yard dash, these questions are fair. However, I would contend his combination of route savvy, physicality, and his defining trait, dominating 1v1 situations, along with functional short area quickness, quells my qualms. The strength in his hands and the ability to extend away from his already large frame are other important reasons to appreciate Odunze's skill set. Here's the last part. Michael Penix Jr. could have thrown a jump ball into a tall contested phone booth, and Odunze would have found a way to secure the pass. The reported intangibles, combined with his smart, tough, and dependable play style, draw very realistic connections to the New York Giants, making Odunze possibly the new face of their offense early in the 2024 NFL draft.
Yeah, I love that. And he was, of course, some may know this, some may not, a team captain. I think if you're the Giants, you're looking for a wide receiver to mold your wide receiver room and be that leader and that guy who every receiver that comes in after him can look up to. He's probably a perfect fit from that standpoint. So I thought that was interesting. One thing I do want to talk about, we're going to talk a lot about positive. So I want to talk about, I don't want to say a negative, but a concern you mentioned, because I saw it too on film, that second gear. He doesn't have that second gear the same way a Neighbors does, the same way a lot of these receivers do. And it shows up in the testing as well. I did think, it's impressive to see a guy who's 212, 6'3", almost run a 4.47 40-yard dash. A lot of people thought it might be slower. And I think on the vertical plane, he does a good job of creating separation, sometimes just with technique, and with tempoing the routes. But as far as that burst goes and that second gear goes, he wasn't great in the 10-yard split or the 20-yard split. He wasn't bad. He was good, but he wasn't elite. And you saw, and I think you do see that on film. He is not as explosive a runner. But outside of not having that second gear, Nick, for me, and there's one other concern I'll get to a little bit later, but for me, I don't really have too much concerns. This is one of the cleanest prospects that I've seen at this position. And I think the first two are just as clean. I want to make that clear, Neighbors and Harrison. But as far as going back last class, like there's just no way I'm putting even JSN, who to me can be good in a certain kind of offense, but there's just no way I'm putting any of those wide receivers. Like I watch him and I watch Jordan Addison. There's just not a chance in hell I would ever take Jordan Addison over him. There's just, they're different athletes. They're completely different sizes. And Rome Odunze, I think, is better at a lot of things that Addison is really good at too, to be completely honest. He may not be as fast. That's fine. So I just look at him as a really great prospect. I want to mention some things before we get into some other points of his profile. First of all, I know some people reach out to me after watching the Marvin Harrison draft profile. We apologize, but we won't be able to put the film in these profiles anymore. It just doesn't work with what we're doing on YouTube. So unfortunately, that's not gonna happen. But if that changes in the future and YouTube allows for it, we will bring it back. Secondly, I know some people have mentioned at the beginning of the show, so I want to try to do this. Please, if you enjoyed this show, if you're new to the show, or if you're a returning listener and viewer, make sure you hit the like button if you're watching on YouTube. We really need these videos to get more likes. It's just not helping us to have them at such low likes. They're getting, 40 to 50 times the views than they are likes. We need likes. And if you enjoy the channel, please subscribe and you can hit the bell button. Then you're going to get more content. Like the minute we do a Harrison profile, you'll get it, or an Odunze profile. And soon we're going to do quarterbacks. We're going to have a lot of interviews on. We have some really great guests lined up. A few that are now confirmed, so I'm going to just mention them right now. Matt Wallman is coming on the show. And Matt Wallman of the RSP is one of the best film evaluators in the business. We're also going to have John Schmelk on the show, a return guest. John Schmelk knows Giants football inside out.
Friend of the podcast.
And friend of the pod. He's been here before. So we've got great guests coming up. Please hit the subscribe button. Please hit the notification button. Okay, enough pining for our show, Nick. I want to get into some stuff when it comes to Rome Odunze. Almost said Marvin Harrison Jr. I want to start with this because I thought it was interesting. Matt Harmon, who we've had on the show, another friend of the show, guest of the show, the creator of Reception Perception, his whole thing, and I actually got started with him in the fantasy football business, then he blossomed. His whole thing was he evaluates at least 6 games of film on the wide receivers, and he charts every single snap to see how they create separation on each route. So that means post routes, 9 routes, curls, goes, come every route on the route tree. He charts them independent of the quarterback play, independent of the production on the play. If the ball is there, if it's not there, it's just how the receiver ran the route. And Rome Odunze became, according to Reception Perception, the first receiver in the history of reception to have an above average success rate on every single route on the route tree. Just think about how ridiculous that is. No one's done it in the history of him charting these wide receivers. Every single route, he had an above average, success rate on those. He also led college football in 20 plus yard receptions, 20 plus yard targets, yards off of receptions, 20 plus yards, contested catches, 20 plus yards, deep yards, deep catches. I guess those are the same thing. So that was a bad double stat by me, Nick. I apologize for that. I'm looking at my notes. As well as this one was interesting to me. We talked about the contested catches, the most insane stat, I think, of the whole draft season, that Rome Odunze caught 75% of his contested catch opportunities. This is unbelievably unheard of. And you watch the tape and you just see him making absurd catches in contested catches, where the DBs are on him. It doesn't matter. He makes the catch anyway, away from his frame, at his frame. It doesn't matter. But also this stat stood out to me. Nick, Rome Odunze led all of college football last year in pass interference calls drawn with 9. That was a pretty cool stat too, because I've said this before in the past. I'll say it again. Those calls are only going to get more plentiful in the NFL with his name brand out there and just with the way they officiate NFL versus college. So any thoughts on any of that stuff with Odunze before we move forward?
I'm not surprised by any of it. When you watch his tape, it all jumps out, right? Like, this is somebody who can run that entire route tree. Yeah, they used him on screens and things of that nature, but he's running posts, he's running corners, he's running double moves, he's running the 9. And like you said, you toss it up to this guy, he's going to find a way to come down with it. He has the Dennis Rodman type of feel to him, where it's like, I'm going to go up and I'm going to get that rebound and you can't stop me. I'm sorry. You cannot stop me, mister.
I agree with you on that.
Any offense, any team can use that, especially when you combine it with the overall athletic profile. Because people will be like, oh, he might be Laquan Treadwell. Like, come on now, stop, dude.
No,
stop.
And we can't just look at it like, but this dude was literally a high school sprinter, Rome Odunze. He won the state title in the 200-meter dash.
And Nevada 4A, baby.
And what'd you say? Nevada? What?
He's a Bishop Gorman guy, man.
Yeah,
Nevada
Nevada Gatorade
4A.
Player of the Year as well in
Mhm.
2019. The best player in the state, and also won the 200 meter dash. So it's not a slow dude by any means. You can see it with the 4.47 at 2:12. But as far as Dunze goes, there's a few other things that stood out to me, and I want to get your take on. So Matt Harmon, who we just referenced, reception perception, he compares him, and he never gives these kind of lofty comps to Davante Adams, which is insane. You can obviously see glimpses of it. I think it's it's a ceiling comp.
It's a ceiling
Obviously,
comp,
talking
yeah.
about one of the best receivers in our generation, and Davante Adams has such a good release package off the line of scrimmage. But one of the reasons he makes this comp, and I want to see if you felt this way watching the tape, Nick, is according to his charting in the games that he charted. Remember, Harmon charts about 6 games for each player, so there's going to be games missing. We may not have watched the same games, Nick and I, as what he watched. He doesn't. We don't know those games, but according to his charting, Rome Odunze was in the 92nd percentile as far as success rate against press coverage. Is that something you saw as well? Because that may be part of why he feels he has that Davante Adams comp. Because one of the things that Davante Adams does so well is just the release package off the line of scrimmage, the feet, the ability to just make these defenders look stupid in a lot of ways sometimes when they're trying to press man against him. So any thought on that? And is that something you saw, his ability to beat press?
I didn't see him in press a ton. When he was in press cover,
yeah,
like it's not like teams were pressing Washington's offense all too often. They play in a really unique offense where you have 3 really talented receivers. It's spread out. Michael Penix Jr. can make a throw from the far hash way outside the numbers.
True.
So it's not like teams were up and aggressively pressing him. When he was being pressed, yeah, I saw somebody who had quick feet, nimble feet, and somebody who could use his hands. But I wouldn't necessarily like when you draw the name of Davante Adams, the first place my mind goes, other than this guy's one of the best receivers of our generation, is his release package. And I can't sit here in good faith and say Odunze has that. You know what I'm saying?
No college athlete's gonna have
Can
that.
he develop into that? Yeah, possibly, because I feel like he has at least the intangibles. Because we've heard about that since the end of the college football season. Sure. We know he was a team captain. Everyone raves about how he just murders it and he kills it in the meeting room. Now, does that mean he is somebody who's just going to develop a release package? No, but it does mean that he's coachable. And I think if you pair him with a Mike Groh, if you pair him with a really good wide receiver coach, he can grow into that. From the little bit of press that we did see him against, it was successful, but I wouldn't say that's his defining trait or anything.
Yeah, and that's 92nd percentile. That doesn't include the sample size. That could be a low sample size, so it takes away from it in some regard. And I think one thing to note that's important is Davante Adams didn't have Davante Adams release package out of Fresno State. He's something he worked on and he developed at the NFL level, and something he talked about a lot as well. So that could be more of a projection on Harmon's part, and that's fine with me because I can see it. Some things that stood out to me about Rome Odunze. Let's talk about one, not negative, but a concern for me, Nick. You talked about the offense that they ran at Washington. And one thing that I noticed, and then it showed up in the charting as well. Did you know that he had just 6 combined targets in 2023? Just 6. That's a really low number on in routes and on slants, according to Pro Football Focus. That kind of shows you an idea of, that's also why I have some qualms with Michael Penix, if I'm going to be honest. There's just not a lot of middle of the field throws, and that's, it's not to say he can't do it, but it's harder to project that he can. And those outside throws are just not typically available at the NFL level unless you're facing a defense that's like shifting coverage away from the field side and leaving stuff open that, not most defenses won't do against competent quarterbacks from processing standpoint. So is that anything that concerned you at all? Just the middle of the field stuff with Odunze, not a lot of in breaking routes in the intermediate, and then not a lot of slants?
No, because if you watch not just those 6, but if you watch the tape, you see him getting in and out of his breaks, I would say functionally. Yes. Again, he's not Malik Neighbors in doing so. It's one of my knocks is he just doesn't necessarily have that quick burst that a lot of top 5 picks, because Rome Odunze, he's being discussed in the top 5. He doesn't necessarily have that, but it's not slow. It's not lumbering. He's not heavy footed. He can get in and out of his breaks for a guy of his size, I would say more than functionally. And he also ran like a 3-cone at 6.88. So when I'm thinking about somebody who can change direction, Rome Odunze fits that bill. And it's not just because of the 6'8". When you turn on the film, you don't see a stiff athlete out there. He is somebody who can sink his hips. He is somebody who can quickly turn on that comeback. He catches the ball. He can make one man miss, right? So I'm not necessarily too worried about the lack of targets over the middle of the field, because a lot of that offense wasn't necessarily targeting the middle of the field. Right. They won a lot. Like when you have a quarterback like Michael Penix Jr., when you have a quarterback like Hendon Hooker, right? And I know those are 2 separate offenses, but when you have a quarterback like that, you don't have to rely on the middle of the field. Right. I want to see those guys target the middle of the field, of course. But when defenses are like, you know what, we can shade a little bit towards the boundary side because we're on this hash, and then Michael Penix Jr. just rips a fastball well outside the numbers to Rome Odunze in a one-on-one who has cornerback who's playing inside leverage and he has all of that space to the outside to put an accurate pass on. Why not do that, right?
True.
So that's kind of where I'm at with it.
My concern with that always is, as a from a rejection standpoint, is
Yeah.
they didn't have to rely on the middle of the field at the college level, based in a large part or at some part on the college rules. Will that be the same case in the NFL? And that's more for the quarterback, I think, than the receiver here.
It is, yes.
But it's just something to consider. This offense may not always look the same. And as far as just how he is as an athlete goes, I think I want to make it clear that he's not the same athlete as Neighbors, as Nick broke down. That's like an elite level athlete. But Rome Odunze is a pretty freaking damn good athlete. According to RAS, Kent Lee Platt in the RAS score, he's the 96th best athlete out of 3,063 receivers from 87 to 2024 in the combine. And that's not just your 40-yard dash. It's everything. It's the fact that he has a 39-inch vertical, which is elite. It's great. And when you watch it on film, it's like he utilizes that to the perfect, like, it's not just like you can jump out of the building and some guys can jump and they may not look that great. Like, when they're jumping on film, it doesn't look the same when they're actually in the game, but he maximizes his space with his body control and his elite ability to pluck away from frame. So it's like, that is something you see show up on tape. So this is not a bad athlete. It's 100 out of 3,000 to ever go to the combine. So we're still talking about a very, very good athlete here.
What's going on, Big Blue Banter listeners? I'm excited for the football season for several reasons. And one of those reasons is Prize Picks, which is North America's largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform. And it's so simple to use. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including professionals, sharks, and people who are going to exploit you, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you just watch the winnings roll in. It's very simple to play and gives you a little extra skin. I've set my picks in less than 60 seconds. There are so many stats to choose from, and the withdrawals of funds are easy and quick. Dan and I will be adding a segment to our show before every game where we pick our favorite stats, more or less yards or touchdowns, what have you, and we'll be discussing why from a scheme, matchup, and game theory perspective. I love their promotions and how easy their interface is to operate at Prize Picks. I may select more on tackles for a loss from Bobby Okereke or Kayvon Thibodeau next game. They also do other sports as well. It's a really cool experience. Please join Dan and I in the fun of Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/banter and use code BANTER for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/banter and use code BANTER for a first deposit match up to $100. You will not regret it. You ever feel sluggish or out of focus? Are you stressed? Has your digestive system caused discomfort or flatulence like a certain co-host on this podcast during a live stream? If so, you should check out AG1. When I started drinking AG1 daily, I could feel a real difference in my daily health. I had more energy, I was better off at the gym, and I could focus on my work in a much more efficient manner. That's because AG1 is a foundational nutrition supplement that supports your body's universal needs like gut optimization, stress management, and immune support. Since 2010, AG1 has led the future of foundational nutrition, continuously refining their formula to create a smarter, better way to elevate your baseline health. Not only did I replace my multivitamin with AG1, but I love that every scoop also includes prebiotics, probiotics, and digestive enzymes for gut support. I recommend AG1 to all my family and friends because AG1 has a team of doctors and scientists that formulate around the latest science and maintains high quality standards within the industry. Even my friends have started drinking AG1, and they always tell me how energetic they feel and how it's helped them out at the gym, and also it's helped them manage their stress levels. That's why we're happy to have AG1 as our partner. If you want to take ownership of your health, it starts with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3, K2, and 5 free AG1 travel packs when you first subscribe. Go to drinkag1.com/banter. That's drinkag1.com/banter to check it out. Our mental and physical well-being is of the utmost importance. Whether you're a world-class athlete or a podcaster like me, we all need to take that very seriously. That's why I'm excited that Unified Healing is sponsoring this episode of the Big Blue Banter podcast. Unified Healing is a new and super innovative global network of wellness centers powered by Energy Enhancement System, or EE System. If you haven't heard of the EE System yet, you'll want to listen up. This technology promotes wellness, deep relaxation, purification, and rejuvenation. Whether you're here in New York, New Jersey, Arizona, if you will, or hundreds of other locations across the globe, access to a center is easy and affordable. Interested in experiencing the EE System technology for yourself? Go to unifiedhealing.com/banter to learn more and find a center near you. That's UNIFYD healing.com/banter. No material or testimonials on the Unified Healing website are intended to be viewed as medical advice or a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare providers with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment. And before undertaking a new healthcare regimen, include EE System. Absolutely, man. And there was a play, just because we're talking about going over the middle of the field and press coverage. There was play against Arizona State, and there was a play against Oregon. I think the play against Oregon was against Kyrie Jackson, who's known as like a press man type of cornerback. He's just long and physical, right? He's like 6'4", where he got pressed at the line of scrimmage. He got jammed. Almost looked like he was going to get rerouted, but he was able to turn Jackson around and then get himself back to the middle of the field, establish dominant leverage, and then present his chest to Michael Penix Jr. But the ball didn't go his way. Arizona State, same thing. I don't know who the cornerback was, but the cornerback right at the snap just goes outside hand jam, turn hips, assume outside leverage, jams Rome Odunze. Odunze quickly kind of like uses his outside hand to fend off that jam attempt, dip his outside shoulder inside and avoid the or he gets hit a little bit, but basically avoid being rerouted. So you see the strength, which is not a surprise to anybody who watches his tape. And then he just dips and then gets his chest to the center of the field smoothly, while also at the top of his break to really solidify the stem. He gives a hard outside jab foot, turns the head, and then he's just oriented right back to Michael Penix Jr. Ball didn't come his way. So there are instances throughout his tape where he's like, where he shows the ability to win at the line of scrimmage, and he showed the ability to win through press and then still run a dig and still run a slant. It wasn't targeted all that often.
Yeah, exactly. And that's not on him, because it goes back to kind of some of the stuff we discussed with Jalen Hyatt. It's like, just because you didn't show it on tape doesn't mean you can't do it. That's where the projection comes in for all of us and for the NFL GMs as well, who have to project. And we talked a lot, Nick, about just this insane success rate on the vertical plane. Again, most receptions 20 plus, most targets 20 plus, most yards off 20 plus, get most contested catches in the 20 plus range, most pass interference calls drawn. But he also, in my mind, you talked about this a lot, and I know this was like what made Julio Jones what he was at the beginning of his career, was those speed outs, that ability to kind of set up like you're running vertically and then just break down. But I saw some good examples of him being able to throttle down after, showing a vertical release. And there was one in the Michigan game. I always like to watch, like the first few games I want to watch of these prospects, Nick, are always the games against what I'd consider to be the best defenses. And sometimes that's best coach, or sometimes it's just, who has the best. Because that's always just like, okay, this is the closest I feel like I can get, Nick, to like what it might be in the NFL. It's still nowhere close to anything. It's like the best players on best college defense are like the worst on the worst NFL defense, but it's something. And I thought there was a good example of that. One thing I want to discuss in addition to that is I think Rome Odunze is a much better screen receiver than people realize, and a much better after the catch receiver than people realize. Now, he's obviously not Malik Neighbors in this regard, but at the same time, you watch some of what he's able to do. And he had, by the way, 175 yards on screens in 2023. There's a 24th most of receivers. But I feel like when I watch him on screens, Nick, throughout the games I've seen, and they use him a decent amount in this regard, he's really good at just body positioning and understanding space and understanding how to get his body forward. Remember, we talked a lot about Wan'Dale Robinson on film this year after the catch, how he just seemed to have this great knack for like pressing vertically and understanding like where the first down marker was and where to get to that spot instead of like dancing around trying to bounce outside. That's how I feel like Odunze is after the catch. I think he just has the mindset and the knack for where the first down marker is and how to get vertically after that screen pass to position his body to get there.
Yeah, I think you're right there. And I think if you add a guy like this to the defense, you have a bunch of guys who can do that now. Wan'Dale Robinson is I like Wando Robinson a lot. I do, man. I'm looking at a guy like Rome Odunze, man, and I'm thinking, who complements the Giants' offense more? Would it be a Malik Neighbors or would it be a Rome Odunze? And
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
no, I'm not 100% certain. I could talk myself into both of those arguments. And I know this isn't necessarily, we might do an episode weighing this exact question. We might have to. And people in the comments, please let us know if you really want to, because I have Neighbors higher.
That'll be a late April episode, like right before the draft.
Yeah, I have Neighbors higher, but I can be talked into Rome Odunze being more of an answer for the Giants offense. And I typically am one of those people who are like, well, you take the better player, but you have different styles. If you were trying to do different things, if you have a bunch of Wandale Robinson, I'm not saying the Giants do, but you have a bunch of players like Wandale Robinson on your roster, you want to add something a little bit different. Neighbors is different than Wandale Robinson, obviously, but Rome Odunze is a lot different than Wandale Robinson. So I think it's just an interesting conversation.
It really is. And I think in a lot of ways, Rome Odunze might be the most scheme independent receiver in this entire, maybe Harrison, but outside of Odunze versus Neighbors, I feel like he's more scheme independent for a wide receiver. And that's not a knock on Neighbors. Like you want to be able to have a great quarterback situation and things of that nature, so you don't have to worry about that type of stuff and good O-line, but you don't always get that in the NFL. And I feel like he's somebody who can come in right away as long as you have a willing quarterback to throw the football to him, because he's going to make that contested catch a lot of the time on third downs in the red zone. That's the guy. Just throw it to him, and he just finds a way to make that catch. He's done it, and he's going to do it again because he has elite tools that allow you to. And part of that, at least what I've seen is, on tape, is you talked about, and this happens with all the top receivers, the late hands. I've seen that from both of you. I see that with him. But I also just think, dude, his grip and his hands are awesome. And it's partly that grip. And that was something I always noticed with Odell Beckham after Beckham said it. I didn't really know about that, Nick. And then Beckham, I heard an interview with him early in his Giants career where he's like, how do you have these amazing hands? You made the catch. You do all these things. And it wasn't just a catch. He would always make great catches in contested situations, Beckham, for a guy who wasn't really projected to be a contested catch player. And he's like, I work on grip strength a lot in the offseason, and it's really important to me, the forearm strength and the grip strength. And I really feel like watching Odunze, he probably has the best grip strength of all the receivers I've seen so far. And I think it plays a big role in his ability to catch away from him. So maybe you could say Harrison. There's probably, a debate for that.
I mean, I think it is Odunze. I do.
Yeah.
And I'm, you know what, man, every time I say his name, I become self-conscious because I'm like, am I saying this correctly?
I think it's,
I've heard it pronounced like 3 or 4 different ways.
I know it's tough. I'm not exactly sure, but I'm going with Odunze. Maybe it's Odunze. No, I'm going with Odunze for now.
Please, everybody in the comments, just go and type out how you think it sounds. Let's just do that. Okay. And then that can be the judge of how this future professional NFL wide receiver, possibly for the New York Giants, how his name is pronounced.
But think about this from this standpoint, Nick. I'm going to contextualize this a little bit. What the point we're making about the grip strength and the ability to, be an immediate scheme independent player for the Giants, because you don't have to have him open. He can catch it even if he's not open. But we talked about how he was 75% in contested catch situations. He also had the most contested catch targets. So he's put in all these spots where he's not open. They throw him the football. And yet, despite that, dude, he had a 92nd percentile catch rate. This dude doesn't drop passes. And the other two had some drop issue. We discussed in the last 2 episodes, Harrison and Neighbors. Some were concentration drops, but both of them weren't in elite 92nd percentile drop rate percentages. And yet, this is the guy getting the most contested targets of all these receivers. So it's kind of insane to me that he's getting put in spots where he could drop a ball, and it might not even be his fault because there's good coverage or the coverage is right there, or or whatever it may be, but he's making the catch. And I think a lot of that has to do with that grip, with the strong grip, the late hands, and all the different things he does. I really love this player. Like I like the first 2 a lot too. To me, I just think all 3 of these players are so elite that I just wouldn't consider one passing on them for a tackle, because again, I want BPA. Yes, come back to it, Nick. My dad was right in 2014. We should have built through the trenches. Zach Martin, Aaron Donald, over Odell Beckham. I agree. But there isn't, in my mind, a Zach Martin or an Odell or Aaron Donald that in this class that compares and competes with the wide receiver who's of equal ilk. And that's for any of these 3 wide receivers. Now, you could say Joe Alt, but the problem is they have Andrew Thomas already. And it is a big problem for drafting Joe Alt right now, as well as Evan Neal, who they might still try to refacilitate. And you don't want to just be like, we'll just put Alt on the right side and things are going to be great, because you listen to every tackle who's ever played in the NFL, and it's like, it's a much bigger jump to flip sides.
Name me a wide receiver over the last 7. You were talking about last 7 draft classes, right? Who has been better at the catch point than Rome Odunze?
Wow.
Who has been stronger at the catch point?
Stronger at the catch.
Like, it's tough, man. Like, you could say Jamar, right? Because Jamar
I was
was,
thinking Jamar. That was the first person who came to mind.
yeah,
But then I
Jamar
was
was
kind of thinking, I think
Jamar was
Odunze
insane
might be
with
better at the
his
catch point.
Jamar was insane with his like adjusting, like watching him at LSU. There were
Uh-huh.
times where I was like, is this just bad cornerback play?
Yeah.
Is this great cornerback play? Is this just him being a
It's
freak?
the
Like, I'm
adjusting.
unsure. Yeah, he was insane. When you watch Odunze, there were plenty of games where he ran deep posts,
Yep.
for instance, and the safety was right on top of him. And the safety was in perfect coverage, like Rodney Harrison on David Tyree type of stuff, right? And he hits the catch point, and somehow Odunze never dropped it. Like, it was just like, wow,
It's insane.
how is that happening? And it's just one of those, man. I absolutely love it, dude. And I don't know if we're gonna do some comps. I have one that's a little out there. I think it's pretty similar from an athletic testing standpoint, but even going back to this player's time in college, I kind of want to put it out there, and I wonder how it's going to be received.
We need to start doing comps. People love comps. We're going to start doing comps moving forward.
Yeah, I was never a big fan of them, but it is funny. So I think he is a more fluid, higher upside Allen Robinson.
Oh, that's so interesting that you said that, dude, because I know you didn't listen to this because we just recorded this today, but we recorded a Dynasty show today with Matt Wallman, who we're going to have on our show later, either this week or next, and we're really excited for that. And that's the first person Wallman comped him to. He said that's the lowest range of it. He says at worst he's going to be Allen Robinson. And he said that as a good thing. He's like, you guys got to remember Allen Robinson before the injuries. I know you know this, but Allen Robinson before the injuries was a fantastic NFL player, like a breakout. And he said that is like basically what he thinks the baseline is for Rome Odunze. And I love that, by the way. I love that call by you. It's a great call. And I kind of, the way I see him, because I think he's a little bit vertically, maybe, though Robinson was good vertically early in his career. So I don't know.
I remember, man, Robinson played with Christian Hack. He made Christian Hackenberg.
He made Christian Hackenberg, who Kurt Benford is now compared to Drake May, despite the fact that
and then this poor bastard
4,000 more passing yards, 30 more passing TDs. Like, it's just
I don't know what Benkurt's doing out there, but like, people forget Allen Robinson. He played with Christian Hackenberg, and then he went to the Jacksonville Jags and made Blake Bortles.
Oh yeah, Blake Bortles.
And he dealt with injuries.
Go to the Bears and that room.
He went to the Bears with Mitch Trubisky. Like, that
and
guy,
he was just injured, and he was done by that point.
Exactly. And now everyone remembers him somewhat as a pariah, and it kind of sucks because he was a very good wide receiver, and he never got to play with a good
quarterback play can do for these receivers. A lot of people think, it doesn't matter. No, it does matter. It does matter who your quarterback is, because you're not gonna. A lot of these receivers aren't gonna meet their potential if they don't have good quarterback play. He was one of them. But I love that comp, and it's Matt Wallman's baseline comp as well. I see it. I see it how Trevor sees it. Trevor Sick move out on the podcast, but sometimes this happens for me with a player comp. I'll read someone's analysis on it, and then I'm like, oh, now I can't unsee this. And I'm like, damn it, he got there. And it's fine, because I just personally can't unsee it. I know you don't see this one as much, but I see him as like a supersized version of Chris Olave. Just that smooth, fluid movement is just stands out to me with Odunze. He's just a smooth operator in space, despite being 6'3", which is just very, very rare.
My issue with the Chris Olave comp is Chris Olave is like sub 190.
Oh yeah, so he is. He's a bigger.
He's thin. Like Chris Olave, because I remember when they both came out, him and Garrett Wilson, they both came out of Ohio State, and I was like, these guys are small.
They're really small.
Very good at football.
Yes.
And that was like the year where we're all like, dude, Devonta Smith came the year before. Like, screw it. You could be 160 pounds. We don't give a shit. And that translated last year too with Tank Dell, who was one of our top wide receivers in last year's draft class.
We love Dell. And it worked out for us there, but we'll see if he can, that the injury happened though too. And that was part of the downfall, taking those kind of receivers. And I understand that they don't look alike size-wise. That's why I'd say the supersized version. But like, something I noticed with Olave, with McLaurin, with receivers like Odunze is they're faster on film than they may be testing time. And they're just smoother in their ability to get into certain spots. And one thing I'll say about Odunze, this goes for any player that I would suggest the Giants should take at 6 overall in any draft class. Do they have the ability to win at all 3 levels? That's a big thing for me. Short, intermediate, and vertical. And I believe strongly that he does have the ability to win at all 3 levels. If you talk about a Brian Thomas, I'm not sold on that. And I discussed this with Matt Wallman today on the pod. And there's other receivers after the big 3 who I think can do 2 of the 3 really well. I'm not sold they can do all 3. Can they win on all 3 levels? Projection-wise, at the NFL level. Like, if you win at all 3 levels at college level, that's one thing. But to be able to win at all 3 levels against NFL defenses, schemes, coordinators, and DBs, that's different. And I am very confident projection-wise that he can.
And the Giants just don't, if you remove Darren Waller, the Giants don't have
that.
We don't have anything. Well,
not to knock Wan'Dale, who may be the closest thing we have.
So I think Wan'Dale Robinson can, but the thing is, he needs to have some separation, because Wan'Dale Robinson has Tyrannosaurus Rex arms, and he's also very small, and he's not the biggest target. So there's a lot of variables.
One thing too about that,
Nick?
Of
course. Yeah.
We think Wandell can. We've seen it at the Kentucky tape. He won vertically there, the slot. But can he win vertically on the outside? That's the difference.
No, I don't think so.
And
No.
right. And Rome
But
Odunze
we don't need
can.
him. We don't need him to.
Sure,
Exactly. Like
but
the Giants don't
we
need
need
him
somebody who can do this, what I'm saying. The Giants definitely need somebody who can win all three levels from the outside as well.
If the Giants don't add that guy who's a go up, climb the proverbial ladder, and come down with the football type of guy like a Rome Odunze is, right? Who even has that skill set on this team? There really isn't anybody.
No one. Yeah, no one. Waller, if healthy.
I mean, you can say any of the tight ends, like Bellinger and Waller might be able to do that.
Bellinger might be able to do that, yes.
But like from the wide receiver position, Jalen Hyatt had fantastic tracking. I feel like that was undervalued when he was coming out of Tennessee. We haven't necessarily seen dominating at the catch point, though, right? Like strong hands at the catch point. We haven't seen that from a wide receiver since. I mean, Darius Slayton can do it every now and again. It's not necessarily consistent, and he has some drop problems. But if the Giants were to add Odunze, it's like, holy crap. This is something that we have not seen consistently since Odell Beckham Jr.
No, I even think back to like the Eagles game from 2022 when Slayton had that opportunity on like a kind of okay ball thrown that was like he had to adjust in the air. Remember that one, and he didn't come down with it.
Yeah,
like that. If that ball's up for Odunze, that's a catch.
There's enough. There is enough Darius Slayton tape though to if someone wanted to push back on this, I would.
They could. Yeah, there's examples of the
I'd be very receptive because Darius Slayton. We forget not even just 2019, like even 2022, there were a bunch of like plays where he was just making these contested catches against Washington, and we're like, oh, that's the only offense we've ever seen. Holy shit! Like because when the Giants
vertical passing game we've ever seen,
well, there was a long stretch of the 2022 season where the Giants offense was like people were like Kafka needs to get fired. Like just give Saquon 36 carries. Like it was wild, man.
The Houston game gave him like 36 carries in that
35
game.
35 carries and a catch, man. It was crazy.
It was crazy, but. I know, and it's not to say that Slayton can't do it. Just from a consistency standpoint, he doesn't do it every time. Odunze will do it basically for you every time. And that's big because sometimes we're going to get these one-on-ones, especially facing if we have Jones as the quarterback. A lot of defenses play really aggressive coverages against Jones and really leave a lot of open space for the X. And that's a really good opportunity if Jones can get through his head. Like, just throw the freaking ball up there for Odunze. Don't worry about it. Stop waiting till he's open. Give the goddamn guy a chance to make a play. Put it up there. You have the arm talent. He throws a tall ball, Daniel Jones. Throw it. Put it out there, dude, and let's see what happens because this guy is going to make it happen, especially if you throw the ball tall.
I think if the Giants were to make this selection, they would have that scripted into the plays where it would be like Daniel Jones, your first read. Yeah. If it is press, you're going to see if Rome Odunze gets any sort of leverage, and if he does,
your eyes the other side of the field, come back to it late and just put it up there. So that's what you see a lot with Penix, by the way, right? When you're watching Penix, a lot of times he's flashing his eyes to the other side. The whole time he's going to flip his hips back and throw to Odunze on the one-on-one, and he does.
Yeah, and he's smooth doing it too.
He's smooth doing it, and they have a great rapport. And the ball comes out of Penix's hands really fast. His release is one of my favorite parts about Michael Penix, and we'll talk about him on a future podcast. We're going to get to quarterbacks as well. We and Nick have decided that we want to do them when we can get to more. So right now, we're piecemeal with it. I have JJ McCarthy done. Nick's still working on that. I'm still finalizing some Penix stuff and some Jaden Daniels stuff, and we both haven't really gotten to where we want to be yet on the other guys. We're going to most likely skip Caleb Williams as a heads up. Unfortunately, the Giants are not going to have an opportunity to draft a quarterback like that. Just giving you a heads up on that. Otherwise than that, I don't have too much more on Odunze. I will say this as far as answering some of the questions we've answered already. I would love him at 6.
Yeah.
If it's 6, him versus Neighbors, that's when it becomes tough. I lean Neighbors now. But I don't know, man. I think about Odunze, and I just love the idea of having a contested catch guy on the Giants who can.
I agree. I go Neighbors though.
I think I still have to go Neighbors. He's just too freaking good.
But maybe we'll have a podcast on that overall a little bit later.
Yeah,
see what people have to say in the comments.
I'm not making that declaration yet. But either way, for these guys, I would be happy to get both of them, even if it means no quarterback or maybe a quarterback later in this draft or next year's draft. Anyway, that's all the time we have for on today's Big Blue Banter. We will be talking to you soon. Some fun interviews coming. Have a great rest of your week, and go Giants.